So for years, you guys have been asking me to do a what vintage guitar would I buy or a vintage guitar deep dive video. And I want to point out that Guitar Center gave me a discount so that I could buy a guitar and do this video. So I want to thank them for that. So here's what I want to do. I know a lot of times when you guys think vintage guitars, you think Fenders, Gibsons, Martins, Gretsches. And not only are those guitars super expensive, to me, they already reissue those or make affordable versions of those. So to me, the interesting guitars are the guitars that are somewhat not only collectible and cool, but maybe priced like something you could be looking at right now that's new, that maybe is not as interesting and different. So let's take a look and see what we can find. So here's a 1960s Aldine for $509. Here's a 1970s Epiphone that's made in Japan. Here's a vintage 1980s PV. They're a little heavy, but you can see the prices have come down and the market is definitely adjusting back down. $549. So again, these guitars are a little bit different than what you're normally seeing on the new pages of websites. So at least it makes it a little fun. Here's a vintage 1960s K for $500. But here's what I'm really after. Here's a vintage 1977 Ibanez 2355, which is a jazz archtop Ibanez's version of the ES 175. So you have a handmade, made in Japan, archtop jazz guitar that is over 40 years old. And I shouldn't have to point it out to guitar freaks like you guys, but made in Japan, Ibanez's currently are running between $2,500 and $3,500, much less what a Gibson ES 175 is going for. My only concern right here is the nut. It doesn't look great. And even though Guitar Center's pictures aren't super detailed and their descriptions aren't super detailed as well, they do give you a return policy. However, the important part to understand is they only give you 3 days to return a vintage guitar. And that's important because you probably should let the guitar sit for 24 hours, which means you're only getting 48 hours to return a guitar. You want to make sure you're diligent to go through the guitar as soon as you get it. And that's what the point of this deep dive is. So I'm going to put it in my cart. It was $23 for the shipping, but I opted to get $60 shipping, which got it to me in 48 hours. Wow. It smells old. It smells like the 70s. Okay, so now that we've confirmed it smells old, let's get into the geeky stuff. This came out in 1971. This particular one is from 1977. What's interesting is Ibanez themselves admit that it's a copy of an ES 175, so there's no question about that. They flat out say it in their book. It's built pretty much the same way. It's got a lot of the same features. When we look up close, a couple things to look at is it's got a 4-ply blinding. It looks like 3, but you can actually see a light black line here. So it's black, white, black, white. And of course it's dual binding. The back is just a 1-ply. These were handmade in Japan. And this one still includes the original Made in Japan sticker. And then it says Super 70s, and that we will explain in a second. So let's get all the negatives out of the way because the guitar has so many positives but a few negatives. The positives are it is in fantastic condition. There is no dents or dings on the neck. The neck looks great, and I could tell that from the pictures. The binding is intact. It's not cracking or chipping off. These are the original frets. Which is nice, but they are crusty and old, so we'll be polishing those. The other thing is everything is crackly. So if you turn these knobs, they're scratching and cutting out. The switch is scratching and cutting out, so we're gonna have to clean all of this. Let's talk about cleaning out the electronics first. So on the knobs, the first thing I want to show you is to use the ESP spanner wrench. And you just work it underneath there. See how easy that is? Look at that. That was the original color of the guitar. Darkened over the years. You want to be very careful when you take the knobs off because they can crack, which is why I really like the ESP spanner wrenches. Always be cautious. So we're going to use a tool which is called the pot cleaning cap, which is a tool that allows you to clean volume and tone pots in guitars and amps when you can't get access to the back of the potentiometers. And this works really great with Deoxit. So we're going to go ahead, just remove this. And this has threading on it. All right, so looking from this angle, what you'll notice is there's a hole right here on the side of this. Take some Deoxit, stick it in the hole, turn it back and forth. And you'll feel it get a lot looser. And then what you'll do is you'll repeat that on each one of these. And you can use that spanner wrench to tighten that back up. On the 3-way switch, we'll just spray it directly in there like so. Okay, and just work it in there. And you might have to do this a couple times. I know a lot of you were like, well, what about this? It will ruin the finish. I use a cloth to wipe it all off and then use the clean side of the cloth go ahead and just a little bit of guitar polish. I always apply the guitar polish to the cloth and not to the guitar itself. One reason I like Deoxit is that the Deoxit that I use, which I'll put a link in the description, has a setting on it for low, medium, and high, and that is how intense the spray comes out. I put it at the lowest setting. If you get some inexpensive contact cleaner, that's fine, but understand it sprays at a much more aggressive pace and it's going to put a lot more out. It's up to you guys. Like I said, this is what I use. That's why I only share it. A thing that we mentioned earlier, which is the Super 70s. So these pickups in this guitar are called the Super 70s. What it is this Alnico 8 pickup. So these pickups should be Alnico 8s, and the way I always kind of explain Alnico is you have 2, 4, 5, and 8. I think those are probably the most common you see. The way I like to look at it is the higher the number, the brighter the pickup tends to be. And so 8 is going to be one of the brightest sounding. So obviously if it's a 2, it's a little darker, 5 is in the middle, and then 8 is really bright. What's interesting is these are described in their original 1970s literature as being very bright and clear. So that kind of goes with what we expect. Also interesting is in 1980, they moved manufacturing these pickups. So these pickups, if they are correct, if they're the ones that are supposed to be in there, these are Alnico 8s made by Maxon. You might know them as the pedal company. In the early 80s, they switched manufacturing to Fujigen and they became ceramic magnet pickups. I was a little concerned about the nut because it looks a little interesting, but actually the guitar plays and sounds great.
And the guitar appears to be a maple back and sides with a spruce top, a mahogany neck with a rosewood fretboard.
So this is nitro. I know that's hard for you guys to see with the lighting in here, but I'm using a black light, if that helps, black light. And so here we can see there's a greening effect. So this is a nitro lacquer finished guitar. So the first thing we want to do is assess the guitar. Looking at the relief, we have it at about 8 thousandths of an inch. Ideally, we'd want 6 thousandths of an inch, so that's actually very nice. Looking at the 12th fret, we see the action sitting in at 1.75 millimeters on the low E.
So the action's good, the relief is minimal, and now we just want to check the intonation and the nut.
We're going to do the A. Okay. Yeah, pretty good. D. So they look good. They all look good. So let's go ahead and see where the nut's at. So on the high E, we're going to zero it out. And we have 16 thousandths, and that's exactly what we want. We want 16 thousandths on the high E. On the B, we have 12 thousandths. We'd like to have to see 16 thousandths. That's pretty low. On the G, we're at 19 thousandths. We'd like to see that at 18 thousandths. It says 20 thousandths, but I think it's closer to 19. On the D string, we're at 15 thousandths. We'd like to see that 18 thousandths. On the A, we're at 8 thousandths. And we'd like to see that at 20 thousandths. Let's take a look. And on the low E, we're at 8 thousandths. We'd like to see that at 20 thousandths. So these slots are cut really low. So if we have an issue, which we'll decide, we might have to replace the nut or do a build-up with some baking soda and some super glue. So let's go ahead and play all the frets and see if we have any dead spots. Okay, so no dead notes, no dead spots, but a little bit of buzziness. Just a little bit of buzziness. And again, that's because those slots are cut a little low.
So obviously the slots are cut a little too deep. We can replace the nut, or we can use the baking soda and super glue trick where you mix some baking soda and super glue, put it in the nut slot, let it harden, which happens really quickly, and then use a file to cut the new slot. So this is a little tricky to show you in a 30-second tech tip, so I put a link to the full video in the description down below.
Let's go ahead and see if there's any grittiness to the frets. So they get a little, it gets a little rough around where they're crusty.
Because the frets were so crusty and the strings were so old, my wife was nice enough to polish the frets and put new strings on while I was doing some editing. So we did that after we completed all the tests you're about to see.
Let's go ahead and do the sock test. I know it's not a new guitar, but just to see again, we're trying to see what issues we have. Looking at the treble side, we are a 5 out of 5. Looking at the bass side, 5 out of 5. Okay, looking at the bridge or anything like that, I'd say 4.5 out of 5. A little bit, right? A little bit, and to be honest with you, some of it seems like it's the strings, just because they're kind of crusty. But strings, but I'd say still 4.5 to 4 out of 5. So pretty good. Let's look at how much this guitar weighs. Looking at the weight, 7.07 pounds. It kind of feels heavy because it's a big guitar, but it's not. It's 7 pounds. Okay, let's take a look at the radius of the fretboard. Let's see what we have this at. My guess is 12. And see, that is exactly what this is. We have a 12-inch radius fretboard. Okay, neck carve, which will be interesting to see what they did. Let's see if we got, feels like to me a 50s era Gibson neck carve, but not the big chunky neck that you guys are used to now. When you pick up a lot of the vintage 50s necks, they're not as chunky as the reissues, neck carve wise. So absolutely does that line up with that. So we have a 50s era, the thinner 50s era Gibson neck carve. So it's rounded, like I see, it's not flat, it's not a 60s style. The neck is super comfortable. In fact, I wish all my Gibsons fit like that. The edge is naturally rolled. In other words, you could tell at one point it was probably a hard edge, but from years and years of playing, it's had a long time, over 40 years of playing, it's worn the edge over. Let's do some measurements. Okay, looking at the nut width, we are at 43.61 millimeters, which is 1.717. And then on the 12th fret, we are at 54.59 millimeters, which is 2.149. Now the frets, going by the fret width is 0.107 or 2.72 millimeters. Fret height, what do we got left on these frets? Looking at these frets, we are at 0.96 millimeters or 0.038, which would make these jumbo width but vintage height. Right now, with that much wear on them, they're gonna feel like, they feel exactly like most of my Gibson frets, but they are wider. They're jumbo. Okay, let's take a look at the thickness of the neck. Look at that. That's pretty cool. So it has a little, you can see there. So think of this, when I got the guitar, the bridge was just slightly pushed back, and so it needed to be center up, but it tells you where the bridge line is. So it's got a centering piece right there. That's cool. That's cool. And of course you can see it's lived most of its life where it's supposed to be. These strings are very old and crusty. All right, we talked about the neck not being so thick. Thickness of the first fret is 21.37 millimeters or 0.841, exactly what I said. That's not thick at all. That's the 12th fret's going to be super chunky, so we can't do it because on the 12th fret, that's where this is. That won't give us a reference. So what we're going to do is we're just going to go off the 9th fret on this, just because this will give you a reference. So the 9th fret is 24.22 millimeters or 0.953. So hopefully it gives you some kind of idea where they're at. Let's get into these pickups because that's what I'm curious about. So what we're going to do is, the one thing with this bridge is on hinge, okay? The last thing you want, you can see where it's discolored there too. The last thing you want this thing is to come down and hit this guitar. So what I use, whenever I work like a guitar like this, you can take the screws by here and take them out. I don't do that. What I do is I put painter's tape, but this is the important part. From one side to the other. Because you want it to stay put. The painter's tape will not hurt the finish on this guitar, especially in the 15-20 minutes we're going to be using this. You'll regret if you don't do this. If, like I said, there's weight on this thing. If it comes by, it hits the guitar, you are going to damage the guitar. This is just easier for me. Let's go ahead and take this pickguard off. Not a lot of discolorization underneath the pickguard. So somebody could have had the pickguard off for many years. Maybe didn't like the way it looked. I don't know. Let's go ahead and see what these pickups are saying. Here's what's interesting. These pickups are 7.74K. According to Ibanez literature, the pickups are supposed to be 7.74K if they're Alnico 8 original Super 70s. So I'm going to say, yeah, that's what we have. Again, that's only one metric of checking that, but preliminary wise, I mean, that's a great metric. It's landing where they said it's going to be. The odds of somebody replacing it with a pickup that has the exact same amount of resistance as they're speccing it originally is not super likely, but you never know. Let's go back to the neck pickup. Neck pickup coming in at 7.81. By the way, that's also supposed to be 7.74. Let's go to the inductance. Looking at the inductance is 3.47 on the bridge. Going to the neck pickup, we're at 3.53. So let's go ahead and take these pickups out. Look at that. What do we have? This we have to see. Here we go. We have, if you can see it right there, Super 70, 27912. So original pickup. Look at that. Let's zoom in on that. Okay, ready? And we have exactly that. We have Super 70, hard to see, but there it is, Super 70, 27912. So original pickups. So it seems like everything's original in this guitar. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll get the scope. We have a scope here, and I'm going to go inside the guitar and show you guys what's inside.
Okay, so what we have here is 4 500K potentiometers with 2.022 microfarad capacitors for the tone controls, and everything looks really neat and nice in there, and really clean work, and the wood looks great. So if you missed any of the details I've talked about so far in this video, you can click the link down below that takes you to the scorecard that gives you a printout of all of the details, or you can read along with it as you watch the video.
All right, so let's see how it plays and sounds. And what we'll do is we'll run it through the Synergy Syn 50 head. This is a 50 watt all tube head with modular preamps. I'm running a Soldano preamp if we run gain, but we're not going to run any gain today. And then I'm running the T Deluxe, which is a Fender style preamp, and running a little reverb. I have it mic'd up with an SM57, and I have a room mic. So let's start with a neck pickup and give it a play. Here we go. All right, let's go to that middle position. All right, let's go to that bridge position now. Here we go. Okay, so what I want to do is go ahead and switch the reverb to a lower setting. I'm going to go ahead and switch to the lower gain setting of the amp.
So I'm sure the question is, would I buy a vintage guitar from Guitar Center again? And the answer is yes, because of that 48-hour window return policy. And like I said, it's really 72, but you get what I'm saying. I think that most players could get the guitar, assess it. And again, you could also have it shipped to a store and go to the store and check it out there before you even take it home. In my case, I wanted to document the experience and share the experience with the guitar and the purchasing experience with you guys. And I did that. So as always, I want to thank you guys for your time. And to the next time, know your gear.
So let's talk about what we have here. Oh, she's leaving. I got too loud.